Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope this finds you well. This week's Parsha is Toldot. So, throughout the beginning of the Torah, we've been meeting our main characters. So, we start off the very, very beginning of the Torah with Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. We hear about their sons, Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Then, a few generations later, we have Noach and his sons and his family. And then, a lot of generations later, we get Abraham. So Abraham is married to Sarah. They have a difficult time conceiving. And finally, they have a child named Yitzchak, Isaac. Yitzchak, in last week's Parsha, has finally found a wife at the age of 37. He marries Rivka after Abraham's servant went out to look for a wife for Yitzchak. After Abraham's wife, Sarah, passes away, Abraham is like, you know what? Time to sow the fruits for the future. So he goes out and finds a wife for Yitzchak. And so now in this week's Parsha, we are learning the story of Yitzchak and Rebecca, and their two children. So the two children, they also suffer childless years, 20 years it says. The Rivka and Yitzchak are not able to have the child. And finally, once they are able to, Rivka becomes pregnant with twins. And she has a very difficult pregnancy because the two boys are fighting within her. And these two boys are, of course, Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, the famous twins representing the duality of man. So when the twins are born, Esav is born first, Esau is born first, and Yaakov comes out holding onto the heel of Esav. Again, Yaakov, it comes from the word Akev for heel. So that's where we get the name for Yaakov. Just a fun little connection there. So Yaakov and Esav from the very beginning of their lives are very, very different. Esav is the typical hunter. He goes out and he likes to hunt and do things and is very gruff and that kind of, he's also covered in hair and huge. And Yaakov is the exact opposite. He's maybe small, he's soft, he likes to learn, he stays inside and studies. What is he studying? We don't have the Torah yet. If we don't get the Torah until much later in the Torah. So what do we say? We say that Yaakov and everyone who's been learning before this time, we're learning ethics. This is ethics codified, brought together by Abraham and his followers. So then it comes the most famous situation with Yaakov and Esav. As they grow up, Rebecca comes to love Yaakov more than her other son, Esav. She grows to love Yaakov more, and Yitzchak grows to love Esav more. So it's interesting. Parents should never have favorites. We learn that from this story particularly. But it's interesting because wouldn't you think that Yitzchak, such a righteous, good guy, wouldn't you think that he would like the righteous, good, quiet son like Yaakov? It's interesting. What we see, though, is that Rivka and Yitzchak come from very different backgrounds. So Yitzchak his parents were literally Sarah and Abraham, the most righteous, good people, the first Jews. They were such righteous, good people. Yitzchak grew up with kindness and goodness all around him. And so then when he, grew up and became a person, that is still all that he knew. Okay, let's go to Rivka then. Rivka is famous for being her father was not a great person, and her brother was also not a great person. They were not they weren't kind and good. She became righteous and good even though she was surrounded by all bad people throughout her life. So it's interesting how these two people who grew up, so Yitzchak grows up in this amazing warm environment, Rivka grows up in this terrible cold environment, that they go for the exact opposite for how they grew up. Esav becomes the favorite of Yitzchak, and Yaakov is favorite of Rivka. So as the story goes, Isaac is getting very, very old and feeble, and it's time for him to give the birthright, to give the blessing to the oldest son. And Rivka favors Yaakov, and so she comes up with this plan. They decide that in Yitzchak's old age, he can't see so well. So they decide that Yaakov is going to put on some fur and pretend to be Esav, and have Yitzchak give him the birthright instead. Before this, of course, Esav does give the birthright to Yaakov over a pot of stew. He's hungry after a long day and he just wants food, relatable content that he would literally sell anything for a pot of stew. And then later, again, Rivka and Yaakov come up with this plan and it succeeds. Really, really tragic, though. Esav comes in to say, goodbye to his father, and they realize, oh my gosh, the birthright has been given to the wrong son, and runs Yaakov to, he leaves Haran. He he leaves home for Haran. He flees out to save himself from Esau, because we learn that Esau is like violent and scary and a hunter guy, and Yaakov is not. So Yaakov flees after doing this really, really honestly bad thing. So what does this story teach us? It doesn't put anyone in a very good light. Honestly, we feel sympathy for Esau, the guy who's like not great. We feel sympathy for Yitzchak, who was outwitted by his wife and other son. This story teaches us not to have favorites. It's just a dangerous thing, that children should be treated equally and loved equally. And yeah, crazily enough, though, the story of Joseph that follows soon after, one of Yaakov's sons, is similar to this story. There's favoritism, and it just is not a good thing. There's a lot of negative, bad things that were shown in these people who we know were good people. We know they wouldn't be in our Torah if they weren't good people. But what we learned for the most from them is the things that they did that were not ideal. So this is mostly about Yitzchak, Rivka, and Yaakov and Esau. Then next week we get more into the story of Yaakov and his sons and his family. But that's this week's parsha. Just don't have favorites. Toldot is an interesting one. And then also today is Rosh Chodesh Kislev. It's the first day of the month of Kislev. So it's the third month of the Hebrew year. The first month was Tishrei. Then we just left the month of Cheshvan, and now we're entering Kislev. So I just want to share a little bit about the month of Kislev. The most significant thing about the month of Kislev is that it has Hanukkah. And on the 25th of Kislev, we have Hanukkah. And Hanukkah is a holiday where we celebrate essentially the overcoming of assimilation. The Maccabees, these really passionate Jews, were upset that there were Jews in Israel that were becoming Hellenized. They were taking on Greek customs and converting, and that was literally the story of Hanukkah, is trying to combat having to assimilate. And I always think it's an interesting point that and I'll talk about this maybe a little bit more later, but I always think it's interesting that we celebrate a holiday about overcoming assimilation during the holidays, which are so easy to want to be a part of. I don't think there's anything wrong with like getting the holiday Starbucks drink, or singing along to Christmas songs on the radio. But it is a time where Jews notoriously feel left out. There's the Hanukkah bush there's mensch on a bench trying to just fit in and feel like we're a part of the situation, the holiday situation that everyone else gets to be a part of. And so I think it's just an interesting point to think about with this month of Kislev. So just some ideas about Kislev. So like I said, it's the third month. And just to give some context of where we got, the month of Tishrei is where we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Shmini. Like we have literally so many holidays in the month of Tishrei. It's a crazy, crazy time. What I see Tishrei as is like an overindulgence of holiness. So many chagim, so many holidays. Then we have Cheshvan. Cheshvan is famously Mar Cheshvan, bitter Cheshvan, known for not having any holidays at all. And then we get to Kislev. Kislev has like one holiday. We have Hanukkah. So I feel like it's balance. And interestingly enough, the number 3 is related to the Sphira, the divine emanation of Tiferet. And Tiferet, the Sphirot are the ways that we can relate to God, the different qualities that are applied to God in Kabbalah and in Hasidism. So Tiferet is the third, and Tiferet basically takes chesed, goodness, holiness, kindness that's overflowing and great, and Gevura, which is structure and strength, and puts sort of filters them together into something that's a little more harmonious. Literally, Tiferet means harmony. So again, Tishrei, that month of crazy holiness, indulgence, so many holidays, so many things to do. Cheshvan, nothing. Like Gevura. So Tishrei is like Chesed, Cheshvan is like Gevura, and then they are filtered together to make Tiferet, something a little more manageable. I think the energy of the month of Kislev is moderation. Another fun thing is that the word Tiferet is associated with the Hebrew word emet, which means truth. Emet is spelled with 3 letters. The first letter is Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. The second letter is Mem, the middle letter in the alphabet. And the last letter is Taf, the final letter in the alphabet. Because truth is true at the beginning, and the middle, and the end. And we too can be consistent if we're consistent at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Chodesh Tov. And hopefully I will see you next week. Shabbat Shalom.